Welcome back to Lesson 4. We just finished with epithelial tissue. Now we're going to move on to our second major tissue type, which is connective tissue. Connective tissue is the most abundant tissue type and is found everywhere in the body. It does everything from protecting, supporting, and binding structures together. So let's first talk about some common functions and common things that are found within connective tissue. First of all, there's a lot of variations in blood supply. So a lot of connective tissue has blood supply, but some don't. If you've ever torn your meniscus in your knee, sometimes that meniscus heals and sometimes it doesn't. And it really depends on where that meniscus is located, if it's located on the inner or outer knee. And if it's avascular and doesn't have its own blood supply, it's not going to heal very quickly. So a lot of times when you tear a tendon or a ligament, like your ACL would be a ligament in your knee, you have to get it surgically repaired because it's not going to heal itself, because it has poor blood supply. Connective tissue also has something called an extracellular matrix. We just finished epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is literally made of epithelial cells, and that's about it. It's just cells on top of cells on top of cells. Connective tissue is a little different. It has those fibroblasts, but those fibroblasts are making a lot of proteins. And we say that connective tissue has this extensive extracellular matrix because it's stuff other than cells. Connective tissue a lot of times isn't made of just cells. There's a lot of other stuff within that tissue. So these are pictures of just tendons and ligaments, and it's just to show you that there's different blood supply varying between those connective tissues. For example, if you tear the Achilles tendon, which connects your heel bone to your calf muscle, you have to get that surgically repaired due to the low blood supply. So let's talk more about that extracellular matrix. So extracellular means things that are other than cells. It's not cells. So first you have a ground substance. This is going to have water and adhesion proteins. This is kind of the glue that is keeping connective tissue together. They also have different fibers within the connective tissue. Collagen is a lot of strength. You might heard of getting collagen injections in your face. Collagen is kind of what makes you from getting wrinkles, and as we age, the collagen breaks down, and that's why you get wrinkles as you age. Elastic fibers can stretch and recoil, and then reticular fibers are kind of surrounding organs and almost acting like a net around organs, kind of keeping them all together. So this is connective tissue. I want you to see that here's your fibroblast right here. So this is our connective tissue cell that's making and secreting proteins. These would be all proteins coming out. All right, there we go. So these are all collagen fibers that it's secreting. But you can see there's a lot going on in here. Here's an elastic fiber. You have different white blood cells. Here's a fat cell. And then here's those reticular fibers. So this isn't just like epithelial tissue where we saw it was just a cell on top of a cell, on top of a cell, on top of a cell, just forming sheets of cells. Connective tissue has a lot of this extracellular matrix, so it's got a lot of stuff going on. The biggest thing to really understand here is those fibroblasts are making these proteins that makes connective tissue so strong. So, all connective tissue is going to be those cells surrounded by a matrix, and how we can tell the difference in these different types of connective tissue are the fiber types and the number of fibers within that matrix. So this is all the different connective tissue that we're gonna talk about, and some of these you may have not known were connective tissue. Bone is actually a type of connective tissue as well as blood. So let's get into bone first. Bone is called osseous tissue. Please know that. Those are interchangeable. Osseous tissue is also known as bone tissue. And if we look at this picture over here, I always think that bone tissue or osseous tissue looks like trees that have been cut down. Like if you were to go and cut down a tree, it's got all these rings kind of surrounding it. So the middle here is called the central canal, and there's rings that go around this central canal, and all of these little really dark dots, those are your osteocytes. So those are your mature bone cells, and they sit in these little cavities that we call lacunae. And all the stuff surrounding these cells are going to be calcium salts. Okay, bones are made of these really tough calcium salts along with collagen fibers. So that's why they tell you as a kid, drink a lot of milk because it's going to make your bones nice and strong. This is where you store a lot of your calcium. Next we have cartilage. Cartilage is a little bit more flexible than bone, and we have different types of cartilage that we're going to talk about. The first is hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is really important to know that it's found on the end of bones, so this is all hyaline cartilage here. And you've probably heard of people getting arthritis when they get into old age. It's because this hyaline cartilage over time starts to break down and you get bone-on-bone action, and it's very painful. We also find hyaline cartilage attaching these ribs right here to the sternum, which is your breastbone. So all this blue material here is hyaline cartilage. Then we have fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is going to be found in your intervertebral discs. So between the vertebrae of your spinal column, you have discs that act as shock absorbers. This is going to be your fibrocartilage. And then you also have elastic cartilage. This is going to be found on locations like the external ear. If you touch the outer portion of your ear right now, it's very elastic. All right, next we're going to move on to dense connective tissue or dense fibrin tissue, and this is going to have a lot of collagen fibers and fibroblasts making those collagen fibers. We're going to find this dense connective tissue making up tendons and ligaments. Tendons are what are going to attach skeletal muscle to bone, so that was the picture of the Achilles tendon that we talked about. And then ligaments are connect bone to bone. Once again, if you're an athlete, you've definitely heard of people tearing their ACL. The ACL is a ligament attaching your femur, which is your thigh bone, down to the tibia, which is one of your lower leg bones. This also makes up your two lower layers of skin. So if you remember from epithelial tissue, that's going to be stratified squamous is going to be the top layers, and then the bottom two layers underneath that are going to be this dense connective tissue. Now we're going to talk about the different types of loose connective tissue. One is areolar connective tissue, and we're going to find this kind of surrounding all of our internal organs. It's going to have a lot of those reticular fibers because it's literally creating a net around your internal organs. And we also find it under all of our mucous membranes. This is the tissue that we kind of store nutrients and we also dump waste into. This is the tissue that forms edema, which is fluid. So if you've ever sprained your ankle and your ankle kind of swells up, that's edema or swelling. And you're going to hold this fluid in this areolar tissue. Areolar tissue also has a lot of white blood cells that are basically scavenging this tissue looking for bacteria and different debris. So here's a picture of areolar connective tissue. It's really important to know what everything looks like. So here are some collagen and elastic fibers. You're going to have some reticular fibers in there too. And then these really dark spots here are going to be your actual fibroblasts, so the actual cells making all these fibers. Adipose tissue, commonly known as fat, and we've looked at adipocytes on our cell diversity lecture. And really it's just a cell filled with oil that has a nucleus pushed off to the side. It is going to be found, it's the very, 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 very last layer of skin. So it's going to go stratified squamous, the dense connective tissue, and then you're going to have adipose tissue below that to help insulate the body. We also find this surrounding our kidneys and our eye sockets to protect the organs. So here's our area, or our adipose tissue, and I think it's an easy one to identify because it's just going to be huge, large cells that are completely clear because they're just filled with oil. Okay, reticular connective tissue. This is basically a whole bunch of reticular fibers thrown together. It forms stroma, which is basically the internal framework of some of your organs, and it can support blood cells in lymphoid organs like lymph nodes, the spleen, and the bone marrow. We don't talk a whole lot about reticular connective tissue. Just know that it really does help in the immune response. Next, we have blood or vascular tissue, and this is exactly how it sounds. It's all of your red blood cells and all of the different things surrounding it. It's blood plasma and then your blood cells. So the fibers are really just going to be protein molecules that are kind of floating within your blood. This would be like platelets, which are going to help clotting. And the whole purpose of vascular tissue is to carry nutrients, waste, and gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen around the body. All right, so that was it. Thank you for watching. Make sure your note guide is completely filled out, and now you're good to complete all your tasks for lesson 4.